And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another BP TV. I am JT. It's Sunday evening here in Australia. Thank you for tuning in. And tonight we're going to be talking about injury. It's one of those things that's unavoidable, my friends. If you are on the jiu-jitsu journey, you are likely to get an injury, ranging from very small on a regular basis, and occasionally you're going to get those big ones. You're going to get those surgeries that get you off the mats for 6 months. And if you haven't experienced that, I'm happy for you. And actually, what we want to do is do everything we can to avoid injury. But when injury strikes, what are you going to do? So I'm going to give you a little overview. If you have any questions, feel free to just put them in the side. I'll address them relevant to as we go. So just hear the overview, guys, and then we'll go from there. So first things first, you actually need to know the stages of injury, because there's four major stages of injury, and you got to work out where are you in this kind of spectrum. And once you work out where you are in that spectrum, that then dictates what you do next. So the stages of injury, we've got four. Then the second point we're going to talk about tonight is acute versus chronic. So if you have a very sudden injury, like you just feel like a pop in your knee, that is acute. Whereas if you've got like a really tight, sore shoulder and it just won't go away, and it's been sore and stiff for weeks and months, you got comored a little bit one time and now it's always niggling, this is chronic. So we need to really talk about how we treat both of these. And what is our approach in terms of dealing with acute versus chronic injuries? Now, number three is the use of ice and anti-inflammatories. Now, don't get me wrong, they do have their uses, but it may not be what you think. So I'm going to really cut through the nonsense tonight to really let you know, as somebody who's used plenty of ice and consumed way too many anti-inflammatories, let me save you some time by breaking that down. Then our fourth point will be, how soon can I get back on the mats? Because that's all we really want to do, right? We want to get back to jiu-jitsu. And look, impatience is your worst enemy as far as injury goes, because essentially you might feel pretty good, but you're not 100%, but you're like, I'm good enough to roll. Let me just roll. Like I'll just go light. But that's never what happens. So we actually need a staged kind of transition from where we are now to back to full 100% rolling. And then number five is injury management, taping, and joint support. So when you have an injury and it is almost fully healed, what do you do to bring it to the point of being 100%? Like, how do you manage that with your training? And then also, let's talk about taping, types of tape, and also joint support using, ankle braces, knee braces, wrist braces, all that kind of business, and really what is effective and what you should do. So if you have any specific questions relevant to any of that, please feel free to put it in the comments section. But then that said, also, if you have any questions unrelated to the topic tonight, you can put them in there too. So if it's about the new standards program, if it is about combining standards with the kettlebell program, which is a question that's come up a lot, and if it's about something related to nutrition for BJJ, feel free to put it in the comments section and we will get to it. So stages of injury. Let's talk about it from woe to go, from the beginning to where you might be now. So stages of injury. Step one, somebody has twisted your ankle, or you have twisted your ankle, and you felt a bit of a snap, a ligament, possibly. You're not sure the degree of the damage, and you're like, oh my God, my ankle's so sore, I can barely walk on it. This is the acute phase, or the inflammatory phase, also known as the protection phase. So immediately after you've injured yourself, snap, I'm in pain. Your body's doing everything it can to protect you. So it is going to cause a large amount of swelling. It's also going to give you a fair bit of pain, and it's going to try and stop you from using that joint as much as possible. So usually the first response of most people is, oh, get the ice pack. I'll just chuck some ice on it. That's not necessarily the best option. You can do it, but we're going to talk about how effective that is later. It's not necessarily as good as you think it is. Now, that is the first stage where you should actually be really listening to your body and don't continue rolling. If you're doing it while rolling, you need to stop. In the same way, if you were to twist your ankle while you were dancing, you wouldn't just keep dancing, you'd go sit down. And this is the thing, because we're full of adrenaline from doing jiu-jitsu, we have a tendency to go, oh yeah, just keep rolling, just, don't footlock me or something. No, this is not the way. What you actually need to do is you need to elevate that. One of the first things you need to do is elevate just to help just slightly reduce the inflammation. Because here's the thing, guys, inflammation is actually a key part of the repair process. So completely limiting inflammation is not as helpful as it sounds. Now, we can talk about this in the context of surgery, which is a little different, but we'll go through the full stages now. So stage 2 is referred to as subacute, or the repair phase. This is more like 2 weeks after, 7 days after the acute injury has occurred, that you want to put some weight on it, you want to move it, but the joint is still repairing. So when I say the joint, it could be the connective tissue. So you may have done some damage to your ligament. Now, I'm speaking very generally here, guys. I'm not a physiotherapist. I'm not actually, I'm speaking very hypothetically here, but I want you to see if you can relate to this. You may have partly torn a muscle, or maybe you have some tendon damage. Now, all those different tissues are repair quite differently. Muscle tissue repairs very quickly. Tendons, they take a bit longer. They take a couple of weeks. Whereas if you've done ligament damage, because ligaments are almost like steel cables in terms of being connective tissue, they take ages. They take weeks and months to repair because they're so strong. So when they repair, and if you let them repair properly, they will heal well, and that will support the joint. So at this stage, the tissues are not fully healed. So it is absolutely advisable that you are not doing anything. If anything, the first step I would advise any BJJ athlete is to go and see the physio. The physio is going to be able to give you some advice as to exactly what you need to do immediately. And they have access to some higher level therapies like ultrasound, which helps stimulate blood flow without stressing the tissues, which is going to help the repair process. And that's the hardest thing. Your body in that acute and subacute phase is trying to limit your movement. But actually, movement is going to stimulate the blood flow, which is going to help get oxygen-rich blood in there, help clear out the waste kind of products, and help the whole healing process with, protein as well as oxygen and new antibodies to help everything heal. So that's the thing, guys. I'm not saying you got to jump up and start doing things. When you're in that kind of 7-day, 14-day post-injury, you actually need to be super careful, because this is the time when the body is just gradually healing those tissues, and you need to respect it. This is not the time to start doing anything extreme. Basic range of motion stuff, yes, but here is the absolute rule regarding this: without acute pain. So we're saying joint pain. Now, a bit of muscle soreness, stiffness, that's not so bad. You know, the soreness you get when you've done a big workout or you've done really hard jiu-jitsu, like, oh man, my muscles are sore and stiff. That's okay. That's actually not a problem. But acute joint pain, like stabbing pain, or like a nerve shooting sensation, like radiating from your hip down your leg, these kinds of sensation, you cannot be working with this kind of pain. Now, if you do not have this kind of pain, we are looking to restore range of motion when we are going from the subacute phase to phase 3, which is late stage, which is also referred to as remodeling. This stage is the kind of 6-week phase. So we've been a month, we're coming up on 2 months, and actually your body needs to reestablish coordination. So as you're going, you should have already been doing very light mobility work to restore healthy function. But now your body needs to reestablish its coordination. And the thing that they don't tell you, and we're going to use the bad ankle as an example. You may have never hurt your ankles, but for any of you out there who have hurt your ankles, and I've done it pretty bad, I've been footlocked very badly 2 times on the same ankle. What they don't tell you is actually your hip muscles start to disengage. And so if you're limping around, you start using your hip in a really funky way. And then you have to do a degree of re-education of your hip. So you have to get your butt working properly so that your knee stabilizes, so then your ankle isn't doing too much work. Here's the thing. This stage, the 6-week stage, this is generally where a physio is going to be giving you rehab. They might be giving you some band work. They might be giving you just some basic work to restore a basic level of strength. Because the physio's main job is to get you back to what they consider healthy. Now, depending on your physio, you might have a great physio who understands jiu-jitsu. If that's the case, awesome. But if you've just seen some random therapist who doesn't understand what you do, doesn't understand you, they're not likely to give you the best advice. So it's really important that they understand what you do, and you should take time to explain it to them, because they might be like, yeah, you're good. Yeah, just you can walk upstairs, you can walk downstairs, ankle's all right. Yeah, go do your bujitsu, you're good. This is terrible advice, because they don't actually understand that someone's actually going to try and jump on your foot and twist it again. So you're just like, man, I want to get back to jiu-jitsu. So physio says, I'm good. Not necessarily. Because now we're going to look at the final stage, the 4th stage of injury, which is basically the final stage is referred to as, they say sub-late, post-late, or ongoing repair stage. This is where you're juggling not only like, yes, my ankle is a bit sore, a bit stiff, but I feel like I can do things. You just need to find the line between doing too much and doing too little. Because here's the thing. A lot of people, when they get an injury, they think that's it. They're like, my knee's stuffed or my ankle's stuffed. I've got a bad ankle. That's not true. You do not have to settle for, I've got a bad ankle. That's basically saying I have an unrehabilitated ankle. Now, if you've had surgery and that structurally changes the joint, okay, then you have to work with that. But there's plenty of people out there who have very invasive surgeries who are able to restore to like a 95% function. So if you've done like a ligament tear, a meniscus tear, whatever the injury might be, you should be able to work your way back to a high level of function, at least for, walking around, squatting, being in the gym. But then when it comes to jiu-jitsu, you need to recondition your body. So this is the question. When you get to that 4th stage, so this is considered kind of 3 months and beyond, 12 weeks and past. Once you hit 12 weeks, the physio is like, okay, well, we're done here. Yep, you're good. Because once you're outside of that, the various stages of injury, and usually it's like 12 weeks post-surgery when they expect you to have a good level of function, they don't expect you to be an elite athlete. And here's the thing. Doing jiu-jitsu puts crazy demands on the body. So you need to be ready for that. So the test that I always say to somebody is like, oh, can you do a push-up? Like if we're testing out an elbow, or can you do a pull-up? Can you do a pistol squat, or can you do a shrimp squat? Can you lunge? Can you hop on one leg? Like just testing out, like it's basically doing some low-level stress tolerance for the major joints. If you cannot hop on one leg, you shouldn't be doing jiu-jitsu. If you cannot do a full push-up and you don't have crazy pain in your elbow, you shouldn't be doing jiu-jitsu. Like you have to understand, guys, that like if you don't have these basic body controls under your control, you're going to get some crazy, big, strong human who's going to twist your freaking elbow. Then you're back to the surgeon or you're back to the physio, and you've now gone back 12 weeks and the cycle continues. And that is the last thing we want for you guys. So also understand this. If you've had major surgery, I'm sure that you've consulted with a physio, you've had a certain amount of therapy, and there will be a stage at which they will say, yep, you're good to go, return to life. You have to be very honest with yourself and go, how good is the function of my injured side versus my non-injured side? Is my injured side as good as my non-injured side? Generally, people will say no. And I know from one of my very good clients, I'm not going to name them, but they had an ACL reconstruction. I rehabbed them. We did rehab for like more than, say, I think 4 or 5 months, and they came very close. They were probably 90% function of their left to right knee. So the affected knee versus the non-affected knee. So they had recode their right knee. They went back to jiu-jitsu. That's great. Fantastic. They're back at jiu-jitsu. As soon as they went back to jiu-jitsu, they stopped doing all the good things for their knee. They stopped doing the mobility. They stopped getting massages. They stopped stretching. They stopped doing specific strengthening work. They're like, oh, I'm just doing jiu-jitsu. Then their knee function went down. So I didn't see them for about 2 months. And then when I saw them, they were limping. And I was like, hey, man, what's going on? Oh, yeah, my knee's just a bit achy, like it's my bad knee. What? Dude, we had your knee so good. Oh, yeah, I went back to jiu-jitsu. It's just tightened up a bit. Well, are you doing your stretches? No. Okay. Are you doing your rehab exercises? Like, are you doing any strengthening work? Not really. Well, what are you doing? Like, we got maintenance, guys. We got to do our maintenance. And that's the thing. If you have a surgery level injury, you really got to take care of business. Anyway, I'm not going to harp on about it. Now, like I said before, if you have any specific questions to you that you would like me to answer, please feel free to pop your questions in the comment section. Go for it, guys. Shoot to kill. Acute versus chronic. Also, I'm going to have a sip of tea. Cheers. Oh, yeah. Black tea, honey, lemon, money. So acute versus chronic. If you have just injured yourself, the way that you treat the joint is going to, or the way that you treat the injury is going to be very different to an injury that you've been carrying for a long time. So whenever I'm assessing someone comes to me and says, oh, look, I've had a few injuries. Can you help me? So, okay, I'm not a physio. I always advise people to go to a physio first to get clearance. This is key. And we always advise, both Joey and myself, before you start the Bulletproof Bjj program, that you go and see a therapist to get a bit of a look-see at your major joints or any suspect joint. If you've got a bad shoulder or a sore neck, get advice from them before you start the Bulletproof Bjj program. We don't want anybody doing themselves any harm. Like, at first, do no harm. But some of the biggest problems for most people are the reason why they're suffering chronic injuries is they have imbalances. I'm going to talk about that. But with the acute phase, when you've just injured yourself, how well you manage the injury, like look after it in terms of not making it worse and returning to training too soon, is probably the key factor. So let's say you've just hurt yourself, you go see the physio, you're getting some treatment, you're doing your rehab, all good things. How well you sleep, how well you eat, and how well you respect the injury is key. If you are in the acute phase of an injury, you should not be training jiu-jitsu. Let's be entirely clear. If you have really badly injured yourself, don't go back to training. Don't go to the gym. Like, you can go watch for sure. Like, you want to stay connected to your community. You want to see your friends, have a chat. Guys, by all means, do not isolate yourself from your friends, but do not take your gi. Do not take your no-gi stuff. Don't take your training bag. Just go and watch. Hang out. That's totally cool. You should not be on the mats. If you cannot use the arm, leg, ankle, whatever it is, whatever you've injured, if you can't use it in day-to-day life normally without being in intense pain, you shouldn't be at jiu-jitsu. I don't care how much you love jiu-jitsu. You can go to the club, you can watch, but you cannot roll. You cannot even drill. That's the deal. Because the temptation is too great, guys. Here's the thing, and I'm saying this as someone who's come back from injury too soon. I've come back with a really bad hip injury thinking, it's only a bit of pain. I don't have any torn ligaments or anything. And then my hip is seized up even worse, which set me back another month. So just when I was like quite close, like I probably came back a week early, I then set myself back another 4 or 5 weeks. And that's the thing. It's this FOMO that really gets us. So it's really important that you understand, if you're in the acute phase of injury, no jiu-jitsu. Now, for most of us, we probably do have some form of chronic injury. Now, for me, my right ankle has been an ongoing thing. It's still good. Like, it has full function. It's strong. But because I have torn ligaments in that ankle, it is more likely to suffer problems again. And you might have something similar. It might be your shoulder, it might be your ankle, it might be your knee. And so you're like, it's good enough, but you don't do anything to actually rehabilitate it. Now, for me, I actually have to do a lot of work on my right ankle. I have to do extra stretching. I have to roll out my feet. Sometimes I have to strap that ankle depending on, if it's been tweaked. I still train, but I manage it. And we're going to talk about injury management later. For those of you with chronic injuries, you have to understand that the nature of it might be an imbalance. Now, often pain at a joint is symptomatic of something else. So if we're talking about squatting, say, oftentimes when people get pain at the knee, it doesn't mean that their knee is where the dysfunction is. When people get chronic knee pain, it often can be tightness and weakness in other muscles around the joint. So even though you might have pain right at the front of your knee, this may be because you have very tight quadriceps, very tight hip flexors, and that actually, if you spend some time stretching and mobilizing them, you wouldn't have as much joint pain. Now, that's not to say, oh, you don't have a meniscus tear. Well, that's not to say, oh, you don't have a form of tendonitis or something like this. But you actually need to go and get it assessed. So with chronic injuries, if it's not structural, it's behavioral. So this is what I wanted to break down for you guys. An acute injury where you just, I'm going to get dramatic right now. I'm going to get a bit of paper. You've torn the ligament, right? That can be a confronting idea. That is structural. That is something that needs surgery. You can't get away from that. But if you have something that's habitual, something that you're chronically doing, for example, sitting at the computer. As you sit at the computer, your head is forward, your shoulders are rounded. You look like a computer golem. It's terrible, guys. We have to look to restore function. If you spend more than 5 hours a day sitting, you're going to have to do a lot of work to help balance out your hips. Now, this is behavioral. This is something you can change. If you're like, oh, my lower back's so sore. Yeah, that's probably because your hip flexors are tight, they're weak, your glutes aren't doing their job, and actually, you're probably slumping a bit. You're going into like lower back, you're probably getting a bit of flexion there when actually you need a degree of extension. 1 second. So, Mr. Zero Lag, hello from the UK. Shout out. Loving the podcast. I seem to bruise easily. My left shin is bruised badly from knee passes. Yep. And general bangs from rolling. Also, knees are sore even to touch. Any tips? Definitely. Got some tips for you, Mr. Zero Lag. So, guys, when it comes to bruising, it can be a mixture. Like, obviously, bruising is acute from impact, but the form of it being chronic is it not healing. So this is where we're going to have a look at your nutrition. Anyone who suffers from, unless it's a genetic factor, now I don't want to speak out of turn because this might be a little bit outside my pay grade. Thank you for your question. We actually had a girl I went to high school, Amy Chung, and she would bruise you could just touch her like that and she would suffer a crazy bruise. She was massively vitamin C deficient. So she would never eat vegetables or fruits or anything. She only liked to eat rice and like a little bit of meat. And she just I don't know, like she was a smart girl, great girl, but never really ate any fresh fruits or vegetables ever. And she had to go on some really strong supplements to try and help correct this. And here's the thing, cell damage, which is essentially what a bruise is, if that is just not healing, then you've got to have a look at your diet. And it is worthwhile getting a blood test and specifically asking your doctor or general practitioner and saying, hey, can you test my zinc levels, iron levels, vitamin C levels, like all of this, and saying, let me know if I'm deficient. Now, in terms of sore knees, like just even to touch the surface, you can bruise the fat pad, which sits just under your patella, your kneecap, and essentially that will actually irritate the patellofemoral tendon, which runs over the kneecap. So if we imagine, I've got my coaster here, that this is your kneecap and the patellofemoral tendon runs over the top and kind of holds it in place, that can get irritated and that can create burning sensations and really sharp stabbing pains over the knee if you kneel too much. So what we want to have a look at here for you, Mr. Zero Lag, is that you are not kneeling too much, because just by virtue of you kneeling too much, you can be doing yourself chronic irritation, which is just not necessary. And so what that might mean is you have to change your style of passing for a little while. But really, another thing you want to consider is you might be, for the most part, most of us get all of our vitamins in, which is great, right? We might even take a multivitamin supplement, fine, but we can be mineral deficient. So my guy, awesome. But yeah, I think a blood test, because for example, I am very low in iron, even though I eat red meat probably twice a week. It's a genetic factor that I actually have very low heme iron in my blood. So I tried to be vegetarian for a period of time, and I really suffered because I just cannot live without getting heme iron or blood-related iron in, which is the blood of another animal. So this is what I would say. If you already eat fruit and veg regularly, fantastic. You might consider that you are mineral deficient. So you can actually get multi-mineral supplements, which is going to give you copper, manganese, iron, and zinc. And these are the things that the trace elements we're commonly missing. And another thing which is a very good multi-mineral not a supplement, but a food is seaweed. I'm going to put it here, kelp or seaweed. So essentially, I would encourage you start hitting some sushi. So it sounds funny, doesn't it? But one of the great multi-mineral slash multivitamins is seaweed. So you can get that in dried form, fresh form, whatever you like. So I'm not saying you got to pay a lot of money. I'm not trying to sell a supplement here. But I know for sure that's a really easy way for you to up your mineral game. And organ meats, if you're open to it. You might be vegetarian. I don't want to say anything offensive, but having a bit of liver is a super high concentration of many, many minerals. So maybe try that out as well. Oh, also, oysters. Oysters are one of the greatest multi-mineral vitamins you can take. So if you're not against it and you don't hate them, some people find them gross, oysters are a good thing too. So guys, acute versus chronic. I'll wrap it up. Acute, we're going to talk about structural damage. Chronic is behavioral. It can be changed. So if you have a sore, weak joint, operative word being weak, if you can balance that joint out and make it stronger, you will find a lot of these symptoms go away. But what do we need to do? Okay, that's another different discussion where we talk about muscle imbalances. But essentially, if you can strengthen the weaker muscles, once you identify what that is, then you can go to work and you can do the specific work, which is going to help correct the imbalance, strengthen and stabilize the joint, and then you're not going to be in as much pain. And that's really what we want for you. We want you to be out of pain, feeling good, and back on the mats. Okay, number 3, key, using ice and anti-inflammatories. Now, guys, when I was in high school, yeah, it was a long time ago. It was the 90s. So dating myself there. It was the chronic thing, RICA, rest, ice, compression, elevation, referral, blah, blah, blah. The original doctor who came up with this has actually redacted that. He's actually taken it back and said, I was wrong, because actually inflammation is key. So when you do hurt your knee, elbow, whatever it might be, the first thing is, get the ice pack. Even though putting the ice on the joint itself to reduce swelling is the general response, even though it may have a numbing effect, which might help you in some way to not be in pain, reducing swelling actually slows recovery time. You actually need to have all of the immunobodies and all of the swelling and the lymph going in there to help repair the joint. We need swelling. So putting ice on any kind of affected area is actually not going to help you recover. So elevation, possibly yes, because that stops you from moving. We're in that initial phase of hurting. You've twisted your ankle. Your neck's been cranked from a guillotine. You need to stop training, definitely. But ice, my friends, the science is in. It's been around for a little while. Icing an injured joint or muscle does not actually help. Now, I know in soccer or footy, they bring out the magic spray and get out the sponge. You're good. Onward, buddy. Considering about what it's going to take for you to get back to jiu-jitsu as soon as possible. Now, the next step most people are thinking is anti-inflammatories. So we're going to talk about this in the context of ligament repair. Now, for some of you out there, if you have chronically inflamed joints like arthritis, or maybe you've compressed your knee joint and jammed it together, or you've sprained one of your facet joints in your back, anti-inflammatory is going to make you feel real good. You're going to have that anti-inflammatory, like, oh, I'm back, baby. I can do anything. And then you're probably going to go to jiu-jitsu, which is possibly going to lead to greater inflammation. So when that anti-inflammatory wears off, you're going to be a lot sorer. This is a problem. But here is the major issue with taking anti-inflammatories. And I'm somebody who's had that hospital-grade anti-inflammatories. I actually went to I had torn ligaments in my knee. I was seeing a sports medicine specialist, like a doctor of sports medicine, and she prescribed me Voltaren 50s. So now a lot of people, when you get Voltaren, look, I'm not saying you should do this. They'll give you 12.5s. And I was like, 12.5s? This is weak. I need some strong anti-inflammatories. There is two very key drawbacks to why anti-inflammatories are not good. Number one, it is really bad for the lining of your gut. If you want to dissolve the lining of your gut, which is your first, like other than your skin, your most major source of immunity, willpower, everything, like your gut is so important. It has been shown that anti-inflammatories of all different brands really eat through the mucus lining of your gut. And that's terrible. That leads to stomach ulcers. It leads to gut infections. It leads to bad digestion. So many issues because of taking anti-inflammatories. Now, I'm very lucky. I've had very healthy gut my whole life. It didn't affect me in that way. But the other thing is, guys, let's think this. Imagine that this is your ligament. Now, you've torn your ligament right down to the last little bit. It's a grade 2. It's a grade 2.5. You almost need surgery, but somehow you avoid it. And slowly the ligaments want to heal. And slowly they come back. This takes 3 or 4 months, right? Now, understand this. If you take anti-inflammatories because they make you feel good, you've gone from here, it will take you 2 months just to come back to like there, which is like barely a grade 2. You've slowed down your repair by like 50 to 60%. That's what anti-inflammatories do. Because they stop the natural healing process of the body, actually they've shown, and they were doing it in studies of ligaments of the knee and the elbow. I read 2 studies actually that were saying not only does it slow the rate of growth of ligaments like connective tissues, but those ligaments do not heal as strongly. So here's the deal. If you want to avoid the pain, and I've talked about this before with hypertrophy, if you take like ibuprofen or anti-inflammatories in the kind of healing process of the muscles, your muscles don't get as strong and they don't get as big. So if you want to get the gains, you got to take the pain. This no pain, no gain in this situation is actually true. So if you're like, oh, I just want to get back to jiu-jitsu, I'll take the anti-inflammatories, I'll strap it, I'll just train. Your knee will not fully heal. Your elbow will not fully heal. And ultimately over time, if you've avoided surgery the first time because you hung in there, the next time it will be catastrophic. What he had said, the inflammation was so bad for him, he could do nothing after. He has to understand is if your doc take the anti-inflammatories so you can get some basic movement. Okay, they're the authority. They're way above my pay grade, right? But if you're just someone who's, trained jiu-jitsu, felt your ankle pop, and you think it's a good idea to take anti-inflammatories, I'm actually going to say that's not the best way to go about it. And you can check. You don't have to take my advice on this, guys. You can do research yourself, talk to somebody, talk to a physio, talk to somebody smarter than me, and generally you will find the movement in the health and medical profession is to move away from anti-inflammatories. If anyone is pushing you to take anti-inflammatories a lot, they do not have your best interests at heart because it's terrible for your stomach, terrible for your liver, and it's also bad for your ligaments. Just saying. All right, guys, how soon can I get back on the mats? Okay, well, this is the test. If you have a bad knee, can you hop on that knee? Can you hop up and down on that knee? Can you skip? Can you run? Can you jump? Can you do basic life functions? Imagine now you're a child. You're just going to play with your friends. Now, If your knee's sore and you're a child, you sit down on the ground and you might pout, you want attention, whatever, you stop playing is a natural response. But we all love that free feeling of when the adrenaline hits and we just want to run and play, right? Like in jiu-jitsu. And here's the thing, adrenaline has this pain masking effect. And that's why a lot of people struggle to do other things, but they're like, yeah, but when I'm at jiu-jitsu, I'm good. When I get there, once I get through warm-up, I'm good. First roll, I'm in there. And then outside of jiu-jitsu, they're crippled. So here's the thing. Put BJJ to the side. Can you run, jump, walk upstairs, walk downstairs? Can you do a push-up? Can you do all the normal basic life function stuff? If the joint in question or if the muscle in question is still aching and still in pain, you are not ready to go back to jiu-jitsu. Does that mean you can't drill? No, of course. But that means you cannot roll. The question is this, can you go to jiu-jitsu and not roll? How much discipline do you have? This is a serious question, my friends, because if you can't go to jiu-jitsu without rolling, you shouldn't be there at all. You need good training partners for you to be able to practice with that you trust. And you know they're not just going to twist your leg off. And then the second thing is, can you trust yourself? Because if you cannot trust yourself to go to jiu-jitsu and not just get into it, then you're going to re-injure yourself. So how soon can I get back on the mats? It's a bit of a trick question. How soon can you go to jiu-jitsu, do maybe some drills, maybe do some warm-ups, but not roll? That, my friends, is on you. All right. So now, last but not least, number 5, injury management, taping, and joint support. Now, we all know that guy who's always got he's got a knee brace, he's got like a wrist thing. I mean, I knew some guys in basketball, they always had like ankle supports. They'd have their ankles strapped up. We always see the guy who's always got like tape around his head or always got like mummified, right? Now, at different times in my jiu-jitsu career, probably more around blue belt and purple belt, I was that guy, but I never really used a knee brace or anything that restricted the joint other than tape. And I'm going to explain why. So when we're talking about injury management, it's really important that you have a specific warm-up to prepare your body with its different functions and dysfunctions for jiu-jitsu. You cannot rely on your coach because your coach can't remember every single injury you've ever had. Your coach is worried about everybody in the class and teaching jiu-jitsu and just making sure that the new white belt doesn't kill everybody or nobody kills the new white belt, right? So you have to be very good at self-management. You need to show up early, do your rehab, prepare your body, and make sure everything's in order. Now, not only does it take that degree of preparation, taping is another thing. Now, if you have no idea how to tape your joints, you can learn. I would actually advise you to book a physiotherapist and ask about strapping. So we're not talking gold tape or kinesio tape because, my friends, that is bullshit. Kinesio tape is nothing. And then people talk about recovery and things like that. But what I'm talking about strict strapping tape. Let me see. I've got my bag right here. So hopefully this is what we're talking about, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, that kind of fleshy color, brown stuff, and it's strict. And what you can do is you need it to be strict. Why? Because this tape is going to form an exoskeleton on your body. So it should be quite sticky, and you should also be able to tear it at different widths so that you can tape your fingers. You can do kind of extra little crisscrosses. It can be for toes, fingers, ankles, whatever. But the idea of this tape is once it's on, it sticks. If your skin is already wet from sweat or any other reason, blood, it's not going to be as effective. It's going to come off. So you need to show up to training early so you can tape and make sure it really sets and gets sticky before your body gets too warm. Now, the purpose of strapping specifically is it structures itself around the joint to support the joint. It takes on the role of ligaments. So if, say, your medial ligament in your knee, your MCL, your medial collateral ligament, the ligament on the inside of the knee is like partly damaged or sprained, you can use that tape to help reinforce the area. but it's a sensory feedback. That's another really good thing about taping. It sits on the skin. Once your joint is taped, now you guys are like, oh, I don't even know how to tape a joint. Now, there's probably plenty of information on YouTube, but what I recommend is booking a session with generally a sports physio, because whether they work with football athletes, basketballers, anyone, they've probably had to do it a fair bit. I actually learned as part of doing Taekwondo and being a Taekwondo coach as well as an athlete, we're always having to tape up our feet, our knees, our fingers. This is like part of the game. And I actually did like 3 weekend courses on taping different major joints to reinforce them. You're creating an exoskeleton. So you're creating armor around the joint so the joint cannot move as far. It will still move, but the thing is the tape pulls on the skin. And when it pulls on the skin, you're like, oh, that's right, my knee's not good there. And you can say, oh, hang on, stop. Or you can pull back before it goes too far. And really, it's a very good safety mechanism. That's why I recommend tape over a joint support or a knee brace. Now, here is the problem. When you have a knee brace, which has like a range of motion limiter, so for example, it might have a little set on the side, more likely the knee joint might be safe, but someone is still going to stuff your leg a particular. And if the stress cannot go at the knee, it will go to the hip and the lower back, and it will also go to the ankle. So this is why I do not advise anybody to be rolling with a strict joint limiting brace, whether it's the elbow, whether it's the neck, whether it's the knee. If you're still at that stage that you cannot fully extend or bend your knee, you shouldn't be training. Now, I got a funny story, actually. This is about Alex Volkanovski, the champ. Respect to Alex Volkanovski. I love the guy. He's a great guy, great human, tough human, legend, great dude. He was at Absolute, and he had his leg in a knee brace. This is a couple of years ago. It's probably like 6 years ago. And I actually didn't even really know who the dude was, full respect. And he had his leg in a knee brace, and he was still shooting. He came to the pro class. He was shooting in and trying to double leg me when he had his knee in a knee brace. And I was like, what the hell? This guy's crazy, because he couldn't obviously shoot properly. Even with his knee fully braced, he was still trying to wrestle. And I wouldn't advise it, but that's how hardcore that guy's mentality is. But obviously, he's trying to be a UFC champion. He's a professional athlete. It's very different to you, the person who's trying to still walk your dog, play with your kids, hang out with your girlfriends, just have a life. It's not worth having such a hardcore attitude. If you cannot train without use of lots of drugs and joint support, you're not ready to come back. So how do we do the injury management thing? 1, learn how to tape. Always have a roll of tape and do it before you start sweating. But here's the thing, guys. Like I said before, if someone's like, oh, that's my bad knee, or that's my bad shoulder, that means I have not addressed it yet. What someone is telling me when they say I have a bad joint, it means I haven't put the time in to helping it heal. And that is what you must do. Invest the time in seeing a physio, invest the time in learning how to strap your joints, invest the time in doing your rehab, because I know this is tough, right? This is the thing that requires all the patience in the world, but rushing it won't make it better, because what are you rushing it for? You've got your whole life ahead of you. If you neglect this thing, you are actually going to be in more pain with less function from now until the day you die. And that sounds grim, but that's real. So guys, if we do not do the work, and that's what we are always stressing with Bulletproof Bjj, we want you to be back on the mats as soon as possible. The sooner you heal, the quicker you do your rehab, the more mobility you get back. Once you are a healthy, functioning human, then get back on the mats. And once you're back on the mats, you then need to do the work to maintain it. And that's where the Bulletproof BJJ program comes in. So guys, we will actually be releasing our prehab rehab coach, which is going to be part of our system. So if you are suffering with chronic long-term injuries, we've got you covered. From the top to the bottom, from the neck, shoulders, back, hips, knees, wrists, elbows, you name it, we got you. And that will be coming out in about 2 months. So for now, we'd love to hear all your feedback about the standards program. Please feel free to email me, jt@bulletproofbjj.com, or you can email joey@bulletproofbjj.com. Let us know how you're going with it, or connect with our Facebook community. So it's literally Facebook community. It's Bulletproof for BJJ community on Facebook. But the exciting news is this, guys. We will soon be releasing our own Bulletproof for BJJ forum. Now, some people are really excited for this. Some people have said, yeah, I prefer Facebook. But we're going to be putting all our inside information right there. So when you have a specific question about what's the best supplement for, or what should I be eating for, or what is the right weight for, blah, 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 we will be putting all of this resource on our forum in a very easy to access Q&A/Reddit format on our website. And you guys, as part of the Bulletproof BJJ program, will have access to that. So stay tuned. It's coming. And I think ultimately long-term, I'm going to be starting to do more whiteboard sessions where I show you guys exactly how to implement things into your program, exactly what things mean, swap out, swap ins, and then also a few more tips on how to learn BJJ faster, which is what I've been doing with a lot of my students, and I'm happy to share with you guys too. All right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday to tune in and have a listen to me. And so if you have any more questions, please feel free to message myself or Joe directly. If you have any suggestions for topics for the Sunday night lives, please let us know, because we want to make sure that we are helping you with the subjects that you need addressing. So have a great week. Hopefully you get to do some jiu-jitsu. Hopefully, if you've got COVID, you're bouncing back. And if you haven't got it, stay safe. And between now and when I see you next, stay bulletproof, guys.